You are now watching the Conversations on Sinology podcast, where China's past and present meet global curiosity. Join us as we explore Chinese language, literature, history, culture, economy, and ideas that have shaped one of the world's oldest traditions and play a powerful role in shaping today's world. Presented by the Montenegrin Sinology Development Council.
Jelena, you have just shared a story which is very important also from a female perspective, from the perspective of women in business. And I do remember part of your personal journey in a business world in Guangzhou when you were a working mom, and how much work and how much effort and you have put in and I remember the period when you spoke about the first days of your first son's life when he was just born. He was just a newborn, and you took him with you to work and to the factories and everywhere. And I really always admired you for that. So it's a very beautiful story, and for all women in business. And also, I want to thank you for preparing so thoroughly for the interview, and thank you for the numbers. It is very important. Thank you again. And of course, we cannot talk about the city of Guangzhou without mentioning some of the major events, such as the Canton Fair, and you witnessed it expand during your time there. What was it like, Jelena, in those early years, and how had it changed by 2015?
So when I just arrived to Guangzhou, the Canton Fair was, as I mentioned, like foreigners in 90s were living around big hotels, and there were two major hotels in Guangzhou at the time, Garden Hotel and also China Hotel. So the old Canton Fair was very close to the China Hotel. And it was like those were very old buildings. They were at the time also just the display and the presentation of the Chinese suppliers, where as Chinese would say, "Mama hu hu so." And then I want to say it was 2010 or something like that when they moved to this new part of the city. Was like 13 huge halls, like ultra modern. You're thinking like you're in NASA. And it was just like, and then in the meantime, Guangzhou Fair also became international. So I remember it's happening 2 times a year in the spring and the autumn, and each one lasts like around 3 weeks. It's separated by different industries. It starts first with electronics and home appliances, moves to like a consumer product like home appliances, furniture, decoration, and then ends up with the garment, the apparel and footwear. So it was also, interesting to see my suppliers throughout 10 years, and also my knowledge of the industry. Like my first steps in those Canton fairs, when I barely knew anybody, and then like after 10 years, I would just walk in the halls and I knew a lot of suppliers, and just to see them their personal growth and their company growth over the years, and how much they expanded their businesses. They would start, especially those northern suppliers, maybe first exploring exporting to Korea and Japan, and then slowly moving to European markets, and then moving to American markets, and then also Southeast Asian markets, African markets, Latin American markets. So, and also that truly thirst for business development, for expansion, for taking as much as possible from the market pie at the time. I also love numbers, as you were saying, and like I dive a little bit into the numbers of like the GDP of Guangzhou. Just that city when I came, like 2005. And it was, I want to say it was around like 380 billion US dollars. And the comparison method, it's like similar to the whole economy of places like Hong Kong, South Africa, or like Portugal. Like just that city of Guangzhou, it's equal to the whole economy of a country like Portugal. And then when I was leaving Guangzhou, it was definitely over 400 billion. So 420 billion. So it's comparable to the whole economy of Malaysia or Colombia or even Denmark. And as we are talking, as I pulled the number, maybe it's right or not, like just to have a perspective, Montenegro's GDP is around 7 billion euro. So it's just, think about it, it's just one city. And I mentioned like maybe it ended up like 12 million people at the time, now maybe even up to 15 million. But such a huge growth. I need to say that for us, the huge benefit was definitely speaking Mandarin. I remember, and you must feel that as well. Like we spent in Belgrade 3 years learning Mandarin, right? And we were so. I remember people would in this late 90s, they would stop us and like, "What are you studying?" Studying Chinese. Can you say something in Chinese? Of course I can.
They
That's
they
what I'm
still do.
studying.
They still do that.
Nothing changed, right? So and then so you're studying and studying, and you're really doing your best, and then you arrive to Beijing, which has a specific Beijing accent where they put that very strong at the end of every sentence. Or a word. I remember, like in Belgrade, we had our first teacher of Chinese language, definitely speaking proper Mandarin, and then arriving to Beijing and just trying. I remember my first shopping was one notebook. So what we would learn in like a regular Mandarin class, it's benzi, like benza. You're going and you're trying to buy benzi. And then you're coming to a lady, so you're super excited. Your first time like talking to a Chinese person who is not your teacher. You're talking to, everyday Chinese person, and you're trying to buy the benzi. And then you're trying for 5 minutes and you cannot, she cannot get your meaning. And then she would say, "Oh, bra." And then you are like, "Wow, my God, like what a big difference." I always say the first 3 months in Beijing, it was like you're speaking Mandarin, nobody can understand you, and you also do not understand them. I want to say I always advise people who are studying such a unique languages like Chinese, Japanese, Korean, maybe Arabic, like yes, and now with new technologies and all these modern apps and very user-friendly devices, it's a different story. But back in the day, we only had those books that were not even in our native language, Serbian or Montenegrin. It was through English, and I remember how old school they were, in almost a little bit of propaganda in them, if you may. So it was, and then the Guangzhou, they do not speak Mandarin. Everyday people do not speak Mandarin. They speak a different language that is Cantonese. So, and then, but everyday life, also in the meetings, like taxi drivers, bus drivers, everybody would speak the level of Mandarin that you could understand, and they would understand you, of course, after those years in Beijing first. But I remember the struggle of other foreigners who were coming to China who didn't learn Mandarin. There were a lot of, expats that sent by their companies, and it was their life was not easy. So knowing a little bit of Chinese, or just the conviction that you can speak a little bit of Chinese, it helped us a lot. And not to mention that we always ended up in some airports like Changzhou or something like that, that when I came, nothing was in English, like all the flights, everything. And then not to mention that like after the airports, then you go to the train stations. Maybe nowadays there are going to be more and more things written in English as well. But back in the day, a lot of things were just written in the characters. So definitely that a little bit knowledge of Chinese language and understanding a little bit of culture, of course, help us tremendously.
Yes,
And my
language
kids
definitely makes such a difference when you're living abroad
agree.
and you actually speak. Even a little bit of Chinese helps. And I remember my first time arriving to Beijing, when I everywhere I looked there were characters, and I remember how frustrated I was if I couldn't read all of them. And I think that's something that we all experience during our time in China, and it's normal. It's quite normal. So thank you for that story. And what about Asian Games 2010? That was a huge event for the city. What was the atmosphere like? Do you remember how it felt to live in Guangzhou during that moment?
Yes, it was a very celebratory movement. They were so proud. It happened also after 2008 and Beijing Games, so everybody knew about the Beijing Olympic Games. I think Beijing also transformed a lot at that time. And also, I think for the first time, people saw China in a little bit different light. I think that we don't really receive a lot of news from China on a even today, if it's not something that you're specifically interested in, or like if you're not into international politics, I think on like everyday Joes do not really know a lot about China. So it was nice that Beijing Games opened that a little bit a different picture about China across the board, across all the continents, all the countries, all the nations. So Guangzhou was celebrated more in Asia, a little bit less outside of Asia. But I also like it happened in November 2010. 45 Southeast Asian and Asian countries took part of it. It was 10,000 athletes that competed in almost 500 sports over like the numbers again. There were 2 million tickets sold, and they had like 60,000 volunteers working. So it was a really busy time in the city where we had got a lot of plans. We got a lot of new sport arenas built for those events. There's a little called Persha Dao, a little island on the Pearl River that they hosted. Chinese do very very well on this hosting and making those celebrations and huge events with a lot of music and dancing. So it was, of course, across all the TV channels, everybody was watching that with the beautiful, beautiful firework that they really know how to do the best. So it was, it was like you are witnessing a history, if you may. So it was very, very special.
Indeed, and really an amazing story. And I'm not going to ask you another question for the end of this interview, but finally, it's more like an advice to others. After everything that we heard from you today, finally, for people listening who might be thinking about studying, working, or even moving to China, what advice would you give them based on your own experience?
Just be open. Be open to be surprised in both ways. Be open to seeing different cultures. One of the things definitely we as a family adopted is no judgment. Everybody is doing their own way for their own reasons, based on their own backgrounds and their own cultural, civilizational, national background, or the thing they're made of. So just be open. Be open. I think today China, for people coming from Europe and also North America, I think the just this new technological development is enormous. I think I always try to explain to my friends here in America. like think about if Visa and Facebook had a baby, and that's a WeChat, like how they, with a simple tool that you can pay everything, that you can communicate with everything, that the tool that is your social media, like it's they just some things are simply done differently than what we are used to, and just be open to seeing that, to experiencing that, and a little bit of Chinese Mandarin will open you so many doors. And I saw like it's such a it's so much in more enjoyable experience for the individual when you can just read a little bit. I remember us going around in Beijing with those little red dictionaries, right? And like
I
trying
still
to
have it.
recognize, yes. I'm so happy and so proud that both of my kids do speak and read Mandarin. So definitely those connections continue to live in our families. And now the tools for studying languages are phenomenal in comparison to how they used to be back in the day. So there's so many tools and so many. So really try to communicate with the people, and there are no wrong questions and there are no wrong answers. Just like get the wave and just ride the wave. And what I want to point out about China, yes, I was a businesswoman. I was a mom, and I never, in those more than 15 years together with Beijing, Hong Kong, and Guangzhou, I was always feeling safe. I was coming late from the factories. I was taking late the trains. I was taking late. I would end up in some, small cities, airports, or train stations, and I always felt safe. And I remember coming here to States and like using GPS, right? And because in China everything was in Chinese, and so it was a little bit more hard to use it. So I got used to ask people for the direction. It was so normal. So coming here, like, hey, you can use maps, and you can, like, don't be scared. Don't be scared. Just go ahead, ask questions. If you see something you don't know how to use it, because there will be some in public transportations and stuff like that, or like touch screens maybe you're not used to, just talk to people, just open yourself, and the good things will come for sure.
Thank you, Jelena. That's beautiful advice and a very useful one. And to conclude, for you, Jelena, spending 10 years in Guangzhou was a time of learning, adaptation, and constant amazement, and how quickly things could change. You watched the city grow from a regional hub into a true global metropolis, and those experiences continue to shape your perspective today. Your story is amazing. It is a reminder that to really understand China, you have to experience it firsthand. When you live there, you realize just how quickly the world is changing, often right before your eyes. So, thank you so much for sharing your story and giving us such a vivid picture of Guangzhou during that incredible decade. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode of Conversations on Sinology. I hope that you have enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. Jelena, it's been a real pleasure having you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Until next time, this is your host, Jelena Stepčević, signing off. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye bye.